Hi everyone, George here, the editor of the Sales Transformation Podcast. This week on the show, Phil is once again being interviewed by Darren Mitchell in an episode that originally appeared on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. Phil has been on the show a couple of times before, and this time he was back to discuss the evolution of the sales mindsets and how authenticity is becoming intellectual authenticity. There'll be a link in the show notes to where you can find more episodes of the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. So if you're in any way interested in what makes a great sales leader, do be sure to check it out. Darren really is one of the leading experts in this field, and there are almost 900 episodes in the back catalogue, so there's guaranteed to be plenty of relevant interviews no matter what challenges you're facing. In the meantime though, please enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome back, actually, for the third time. I just realized this is the third interview because we did two episodes.
Oh, we did two.
In 2023, so it's been a little over 2 years.
Wow.
Coming in all the way from the United Kingdom, where you're telling me it's really cold. It's a bit dreary.
It's also cold. It's just pouring with rain here, which is, very much what people would expect. I think whenever you talk about England.
Well, and coming from Melbourne, when people have a crack at Melbourne, they say 4 seasons in one day because you can't be sure whether it's going to be hot, cold, or anything in between. But it's probably going to rain. But we're not going to talk about weather. We are going to talk about sales and sales leadership, and particularly some research you've done. Mr. Philip Squire, welcome back to the podcast.
Darren, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to take part in your podcast series. I really think you're one of the best interviewers I've met during my career. So very happy to join you again.
It's an absolute pleasure. And may I say, Philip, there is only, I'm just trying to think, I think there's only another 2 people in the 6 years that I've been running the podcast who have been on the podcast 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
And
That's fantastic.
And this episode, I don't know what specific number it's going to be, but we're at about 860. So there's only you're
incredible.
So talking about the winner's circle in the top 10%,
Yes.
you are
So
in
do
the
I
top
make
of the
it
top
into your
1%.
winners?
That's right.
Darren, that's amazing. Well, I remember when we had our first interview, and you were talking to me about when you started, and about the pandemic, and already when I think we had I don't know how many you'd done, but it was a significant number of podcast interviews, and it's incredible. And I know how much effort goes into running these because we have our own podcast channel, as you know. And actually, we've really got to get you on ours too, Darren. So we will do that. But
Absolutely.
Anyway, nice to be back again, and thank you for having me.
Looking forward to this, and it's great to have you back. And just for the listeners' benefit, I'm going to assume that not everybody may have listened to the episodes a couple of years ago, but for people listening to this, Philip is the CEO of Consalia, and the UK's only sales dedicated business school and consultancy. And I should actually preface this also by saying you are a doctor. You've done a doctorate.
I am. Yes.
You did some doctoral research. Is it 15 years ago now?
Yes, I qualified in 2009, with a doctorate. So between 2004 and 2009, that was when the research study was done.
Love it.
Which we can talk about a bit. Yeah, because
I was gonna ask you if you can give us a little bit of your background that led you to start Consalia and what you do, because you've redone some research in 2025, which a white paper has just been released, and we'll give people access to a link at the end of this episode for them to download. And we'll talk about that towards the back. But if you can just give us a little bit of background to the Philip Squire story, what led you to start Consalia? And particularly in the sales realm, what was it about the sales industry and I guess the psychology behind sales that really got you into this type of business and the research that you do?
So, like many things, Darren sort of fell into this a little bit by accident. Sort of fell into sales by accident, fell into research by accident. But what it was uh, was I was doing a project with one of our clients, Hewlett Packard at the time, who had asked us to go and interview some of their customers about how their customers wanted to be sold to, not just by HP, but just generally how they wanted to be sold to. And this was to produce some video content for a big kickoff event that we were working with them on in Europe. And we chose three people to interview in the initial stage. And what I was doing was collecting stories really from buyers about good and poor practice of salespeople. And some of the buyers were very sort of charismatic and very opinionated and had really strong points of view about salespeople. All very bright, all very intelligent. We're talking about sort of C-suite type level buyers. And I remember after the first interview I did, I sort of asked this question. Yes, you kindly told me what you like and dislike about salespeople, and what percentage of people sell to you in a way that you really like. And I'll never forget the first one said, well, in my view, sort of 95% of salespeople complete waste of time. And so I thought, I tell you what, I think that might go down quite well at this kickoff event. And then I thought, what I'd add that question formally to the next interviews that I did, and the next person I interviewed said less than 10% sold in the way that wanted, and that really sort of triggered this question about, I was concerned about the low percent, because I know companies spend an awful lot of money in sales training, sales development programs, and really you would hope if you had access to these senior level decision makers, you would turn up better than that. And so again, by chance, I happened to be speaking to a professor at a university. I had no thoughts that I would turn this into a doctorate. And he said, well, why don't you take that research that you've done and turn it into something bigger? And I thought, well, it would be great to get this sort of academic underpinning by broadening the research. And really that led to me then doing the doctorate. And I was sponsored a lot by our clients. HP were interested to sponsor us with clients of theirs around the world, Tetra Pak, Siemens, others. And so I conducted this significant piece of work. And what surfaced for me all those years ago was the connection between sales behavior and sales values. And a lot of what I think the sales sector had traditionally been involved in terms of developing salespeople was around sales technique, sales behaviors. And it was very unusual to then start to go deeper to what kind of values, sort of underpin the kind of behaviors that customers are looking for. And that's what I did all those years ago, and identified 4 positive mindsets, which we can talk about, and 4 negative mindsets. And then since then, the whole load of interventions had happened, working with clients, with salespeople, testing the hypothesis, evaluating the connection between performance and living the positive mindsets. And then we decided that after 15 years, let's go back and see whether those values are still relevant. Have there been any changes, and so on. So that's a very quick summary, but I know I haven't sort of shared with you the core findings, which we could go into now if you think it's relevant.
Yeah, we will. We definitely will. But it's a really interesting topic, and I love the fact you've done a doctorate on sales, because sales doesn't necessarily get taught in universities, although in MBAs it's now starting to become more prevalent. But
Yes.
Most sales, and I think you said the same as well. It sort of accidentally fell into it, but
Yeah,
most salespeople and sales leaders don't wake up one day and say, "I think I'm going to be in sales. I'm going to go and learn how to be the best
no,
salesperson and be of great
that's right.
service." They kind of fall
Yeah.
into it. But I love the fact that you, through that research and through the work you were doing at Hewlett Packard. And isn't it interesting how it came from like a sales kickoff event that they wanted you to do some interviews, and through that process, some questions were asked and some feedback. You think, man, there's something in this.
Yeah, I mean, I actually I took the feedback from those interviews. I suppose you could say slightly personally because I was representing an industry sector that needs to professionalize sales, and I felt, is there something that perhaps we're missing or I've
Mm,
been missing? So that that trigger was really important. But actually, what was important to your point about how many doctorates are there now in, how many people have done a doctorate in sales, and it's very few. But I was taken with the way the organizations that kind of sponsored us with the research also were interested in the thoroughness of reflection that you get from doing a doctorate
mm,
and any kind of academic study, and indeed it was HP that said, could we help design a master's program for their large deal bid pursuit team? And, we weren't in that business then. And we decided that we would, I talked to the university that I was doing my doctorate with and said, look, can we create a master's program for very senior salespeople?
mm.
And I was taken with the application and interest. I thought, God, why did people want to do it? And I think for many, it's kind of legitimacy. They're all proud of the profession they're in. Like you said, we fell into it by accident, but it's like it gives legitimacy, I guess, an authenticity to the person that's actually got an academic qualification at master's or doctorate level.
Mm.
So that then took us into the whole sales education space, and for Consalia, it's been quite a transformational. I mean, from the early days of doing the master's programs for HP, I think we've now got 300 or 400 active students going through undergraduate and postgraduate programs now. And so we've literally, our alumni is approaching 1,000,
Nice.
so it started small, and it's sort of grown into this amazing, actually, it's a really amazing story. And I'm very, very kind of proud in many ways of what's been achieved, but just incredible seeing how the individual students have responded to going back to school
Yeah.
and writing academically
Yeah.
and really doing deep reflection on what I think is one of the most important functions of any business, which is sales.
Well, and when you think about it, every single organization, including Hewlett Packard and all the companies you Tetra Pak and all
Yeah,
the others you mentioned, nothing happens without a sale being made. So
that's right.
it's a
Yeah,
it's a profession that people should be really, really proud of. I actually believe that sales is the ultimate form of service, and it's one of the greatest professions on
yeah,
earth. But it's fascinating how many people have this negative connotation when they think of sales, because I think, oh, it's all about being pushy and trying to retrofit
yeah,
a product or a solution into a perceived need, and we'll get into some of the negative values that
yeah,
you got through your research. But
yeah.
really, it can be one of the most fulfilling and service-based professions on the planet if done correctly.
It's done correctly, and yeah, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people do it really well, and they do it very professionally, but a lot of people don't, and they tend to give the profession a bad name, and of course, that negative feedback sticks. So yeah, sometimes because people have been so often missold to,
Yes.
it makes it even more difficult for those that are good to get over that initial trust barrier
Yes.
that
Yeah.
you have at the very beginning. Who trusts a salesperson? Not that many,
Well,
so
no, but and I often ask the question of salespeople and of sales leaders, who likes to be sold to? And
yeah,
it's very rare that anybody puts their hand up. It's probably, I could count probably 1 in 20, one in maybe one
yeah,
in 30 that actually put their
yeah,
hand up and say, I actually enjoyed to
yeah,
be sold to because it's something I can learn from the person who's trying to sell me something, which kind
yeah,
of leads into the research you did and the
yeah,
discoveries that you had when you first did this research, that it was more the values that underpin the behavior, not necessarily the behavior. And yet a lot of organizations focus their time on the techniques, the process, the methodology, the behavior, the doing thing.
yeah.
Can we start with a bit of an understanding of the values that you found through the research,
Yes.
both the negative ones and the positive ones?
Yeah, so I just I wanted to I'll just very quickly start with a sort of painting a picture. So you've got take an onion. The core. You've got the core of the onion, and then wrapped. You've got the different layers that are sort of wrapped round before you get to the surface of the onion. And there's a framework that influenced me quite a bit called Cortagan's onion model, which is why I mentioned onion.
Yeah.
And and behavior, it really sits at the outer surface of the onion. And then if you go from the sort of behavior, you've got competence, and then you've got values and beliefs, and then you've got mission and core. You've got these different layers. And you're right. I think a lot of, traditionally we've looked at, if we want to improve sales performance, let's focus on behavior. And what's the quickest way to do that? It's by, providing certain techniques, frameworks, and models that,
Mm.
whether it's a spin model or whether it's the challenger sale or whatever, these are, quite often linked to certain frameworks or methodologies. And the thing is that the customers can often see through that, and they start to question, those particular techniques. So what we did in the research was to look at what is the underpinning values, set of values do salespeople need to have that will drive the kind of behavior that they really want. And if we focused on creating the right values and using those to govern how you act, think, strategize, do stuff, then will it lead to sales performance? And we identified four differentiating values that were seen very positively about salespeople from buyers. And the first one was authenticity, which is, you spend a lot of time sort of coming up with the word. We could have talked about integrity, but we chose authenticity because it originates from the Greek sort of, but it's about originality. So you have your original Levi jeans. I think it was one of the early ads of Levi jeans, but but it's that originality of thinking, is part of sort of acting with integrity, but it also is about transparency and honesty and ethics and all of those elements as well. So authenticity was really important. Client centricity, obviously, it's a no-brainer. It's being focused on the client. And what we found in that first round of research was that those two are sort of foundation blocks for building trust. And without trust, you can't do the next two, which are the rarest.
Mm.
But it's where buyers really want to get to, which is around proactive creativity. It's sort of not just waiting for the buyer to come up with sort of solutions that they want salespeople to work on in a creative sense, but they like it when salespeople actually come up with ideas that maybe they haven't thought of. And the final one, which I love, is tactful audacity. It's the art of knowing how far to go without going too far. So it's acting with respect but being bold. Now, that is fine when you've got trust, but when
Mm.
you don't have trust, it will come across as arrogance. So that takes us into the negative mindsets, which were manipulation, supplier centricity, complacency, and then arrogance. So yeah, the first round of research had sort of defined these four values that were positive, four values that were negative. And then we'd worked with the large deal bid pursuit team at HP to look at particularly the large deal space to assess whether or not there's a link between winning large deals and the mindsets. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with a couple of control groups to see what could be achieved. So we started off with just the words to begin with, and then we translated that into every single step from responding to RFPs or making outgoing calls right through to negotiating and closing, but underpinning everything with the mindsets. And
So
that was
just on
fun.
that, well, as you were talking about that, I'm just thinking back to when I was a salesperson, but then when I was a sales leader, and
Yeah.
just taking, for example, a response to an RFP, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of cringing to myself, reflecting on the proposals and particularly the executive summaries where it would mention our organization as the selling organization, probably by
Yeah.
a factor of 1 to 5, as
Yeah.
compared to the buying organization in a proposal. And it was all
Yeah.
about us. And we thought that if we impress the buyer with all of this fantastic information about how good we are and all these case studies and these white papers and this big network, etc., then that would
Yeah.
help. And so you mentioned something really interesting there, that the last two in the positive values, you can only do when you have a deep bedrock of trust, and that being the proactive creativity, but also, I guess, the tactful audacity where you can push the boundary and
Yeah.
maybe challenge the customer. But there is a fine line there because if, for example, which many organizations are, under pressure to hit a number, under pressure to hit a margin, time,
Yeah. Yeah.
that can very quickly switch into um, over arrogance or complacency.
It really can. And so, yeah, part of the kind of analysis when we sort of identified these values and mindsets was recognizing that salespeople operate within a system of targets, KPIs, and various levers. And often the system encourages the negative mindsets rather than the positive
Mm,
because of the pressure to get results, meaning that you need to rush the conversation sometimes with customers, not do the research
mm,
as diligently as you should have done. Uh, it, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting when you start to look at all of the levers that can work for you or against you. So and this has made us realize you need to have a systemic approach if you're going to allow these values to flourish
mm.
in a positive way.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah, it's very interesting you brought in this kind of leadership dimension because you're so it's so true.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. Now, last year you did a another piece of research
Yeah.
and asking the same question, but you wanted to, I guess, interrogate and verify whether the values that were there previously still
Yeah.
had relevance, and particularly out of, because you mentioned in your white paper as well, things like the pandemic, but also the prevalence of AI. And in
Yeah.
a digital world, in a hybrid world, do these values mindsets still have credence in the marketplace today?
Yeah.
And are customers and buyers still looking for those from their sales organization, from their salespeople? Now,
Yeah.
interestingly, because I wanted to talk about a couple of things, and we'll draw out how authenticity now becomes intellectual authenticity, and we want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to delve into the self assessment that salespeople did
Yeah.
and the correlation from what they believe across those value sets as
Yeah.
compared to the buyers and how they interpret and how they see it. Can you just talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that in terms of any material
Yeah.
change last year as compared to the first time you did the research?
So, yeah, what we had now, what we have now in the last 15 years that we didn't have when I did the doctorate was we had a lot more quantitative data because we have the Sales Mindset Survey that people can access on our website. And a lot of our client engagements will involve us in inviting our clients to complete the survey. And so, yes, we have a lot of data now that we just didn't have before. But this is self-perception, so this is how do you as a salesperson perceive yourself against the positive and negative mindsets. And the data itself is really interesting. And we found that if you look across all four mindsets as an average of all of the 1,500 or so, just under 1,500 now respondents that took part in the survey, we're quite close to what we would say you need to be in the winner's circle. So on the survey, we're saying above 80%, the chances are that you self-perceive yourself to be very strong across authenticity, client centricity, proactive creativity, and tactful audacity. But when we looked at the data in a bit more detail, we found that less than 10% of all the respondents saw themselves above 80% across all four. And it really made us realize that the importance of something we talked about earlier, which is you need to have all four. You can't be strong in tactful audacity or proactive creativity, but actually pretty low on authenticity and client centricity, because it kind of, you may think you're tactfully audacious, but the chances are your client's going to see you as being arrogant or being supplier-centric, So that was a really interesting realization. So that was one thing. When we've got 180-degree data, meaning where clients, and it's possible to have a client assess you as a salesperson using the Mindset Survey, and we found examples of where the client's perception of salespeople were a lot lower across the four mindsets than how salespeople did. Meaning salespeople think they're doing a lot better than clients do. But we also found the opposite. In some cases, salespeople rank themselves much lower than their customers did. And what's interesting about this is that it doesn't really matter in those 180-degree scenarios what the score is. What matters is what you do with the data once you get it. For example, I know that with some of our key accounts where we've done a self-assessment on how do we think as Consalia we're supporting them, we have been quite critical of ourselves. Yeah. And we've marked ourselves, sometimes harshly quite low. When we ask the client to give feedback, they've marked us really quite high. And when we sat down and shared the results with them, it's given us a chance to explain to them why we marked our scores low. Because we had reasons for doing it, because we felt there's more that we could have been doing that we weren't doing. And we felt that this detracted from the potential service that we could provide them. So it became a very rich source of conversation. And that's as useful as if a client had marked you very low and you mark yourselves high, because it's really important you understand how your clients perceive you as a salesperson. Yeah. So yeah, the self-analysis, the quantitative data has been really interesting, but it's based on the old framework, not the new one, because it's only been in November last year that we published the findings of the new data. We've just recently modified the Mindset Survey to bring it in line with the new findings. So it's a bit of a look back on the historical framework to kind of add a bit more richness to the data that we've got.
Love that. I love that. And the fact that you have used it yourself and
Yeah,
are able to do the reflection and sit down with your buyers and go through it, it gives you,
yeah,
and that probably does two things from my perspective. It's demonstration of authenticity.
yeah,
Um, there's a level of curiosity there, which is understanding how does the client see you, which leads into client centricity. And
yeah,
through those two gives you a great basis to get information to improve the client engagement, which through that process improves trust, which then
yes,
enables you to now
correct.
work with the client because
Yeah,
how many organizations want to have a collaborative win-win partnership
yeah,
agreement or a relationship rather than
yeah,
just a supplier customer relationship? And
right.
when that happens, you've got a position or a platform where you can be tactful and audacious, but do it in a respectful way.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So you know, can't see any reasons why you wouldn't want to do it in that sense. Just, there's so many reasons for doing it. Whether it's bad news or good news, it's all helpful. Yeah, it's all helpful.
So,
Um, I'd just like to add one thing
yeah.
that's become clear, and that is that if you are an account manager or a salesperson and you are looking after 60 or 70 accounts,
Hmm.
it's really difficult to apply the mindsets all the time with all of those accounts. And this, for us, has had sort of led us down the importance of segmentation.
Hmm.
And how do you structure your sales force? So for leaders, I think it's been an interesting exercise in sort of reinforcing the importance of segmentation and therefore the investment you need to make in your key accounts in order to kind of maximize the relational value you can get by applying the mindsets
Yeah.
in a strong way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Because you can't, if you've got 60 accounts to manage, you simply don't
You
have
just
enough
can't do
time
it.
to be the same to all people.
And of course, technology now is enabling you to get up to date more easily, but the quality thinking time that you need to have in
Yeah,
order to sort of come up with proactively creative ideas and bold suggestions. I mean, it takes time to do it, and it's difficult to do that. Yeah, if you've got a
it is.
huge account base to work on. Yeah,
100%. 100%. So before I talk about the latest research and
yeah.
talk about one particular element, I just wanted to ask you in relation to this research as a tool, not just for organizations to customize development plans for their sales teams, whether it be sales training, but also from a sales leadership point of view, how can they use or how have organizations used this research to be more pinpointed or more targeted in terms of the coaching, the mentoring, the development they do for their sales teams?
Um, I think that when you start to talk about values, you touch upon culture, and the kind of culture that you want to kind of build in your team. And as a leader, I think that is, it's a fundamental question is, what is your vision, for how you want to drive yourself and your sales teams to achieve the objectives that you have. So, and then, as a leader, then it touches upon coaching and mentoring and development. If you've got, for example, if you've got a perception in your team that you've got a lot of the team could benefit from being more proactively creative or more tactfully audacious in the way that they approached. It can touch on everything from account planning to how you train them to negotiate. There's so many different things you can do to develop people's skills,
Mm,
design thinking if it's proactive creativity. There are many self-reflection frameworks and techniques that could be used to get people to problem solve in a more creative way. So, yeah, I mean, many opportunities to kind of look at how you can develop your team to apply the different mindsets when you if you believe it to be important.
Mm.
But we often say that the starting point for driving this sort of initiative change is with customers. There's nothing, the interviewing of customers about how do you want to be sold to, I don't think happens enough.
No.
People do a lot of those, customer service surveys, but they don't ask, how do you want us to sell to you? And so I would often recommend start with your customer base, get the data, get the stories, because there's nothing like customers telling you
Yeah,
what's important to them to get change happening inside the
absolutely.
organization.
100%. And the reason I ask that question is there are so many organizations that go and buy off-the-shelf sales training, thinking that the sales training is going to make a world of difference to how they sell to their customers. And they don't have the tailoring. They don't understand how customers like to be sold to. They think it's the spin the spin methodology or the challenger sales methodology,
Yeah,
which, by the way, is all supplier centric. It is not
it
customer
is.
centric.
Yeah. I think that's so true, and a lot of one has to be a bit careful because I sort of have a lot of respect for people like Neil Rackham, who's done a lot of research that's led to spin, and also of course the Challenger sale is great as well in many respects, but if used in the wrong way, I think could come across as being very supplier centric
Mm,
and this insight-led conversations, yes, that tends towards proactive creativity, but if you don't have that constructive trust,
yes.
in the first place, then I think these are tools that you can have. And sadly, I think many of the sales training solutions on the market are, just as you've said, things that you are more addressing the behavioral side, not
Mm,
the values that underpin the behaviors. And the correlation between sort of values and behavior is essential, in my view.
yes.
It's where you need to start. It's like the operating system has to be correct for the applications that you might want to sit on top of it. Could
Mm,
be types of techniques if they're going to work effectively.
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the research you did, it was it the same? Was it just under 1,500 this time around as well?
No, no, the research this time was qualitative face-to-face interviews
Right.
with buyers from around the world. And it's very similar to what I did in the doctorate.
Hmm.
So the mindset survey, which is on our website, was was designed just to collect the data around what were the initial four mindsets, not the new ones. The new ones now, yes, the mindset survey, of course, is being adjusted. I think it's live now on the website, but it's so new, this research.
Mm,
Um, I think the mindset survey still stands, but the nuances, I think, of what we've got now, having conducted the research again 15 years later, is really important. And it's great to have this chance to talk about it with you,
yeah,
on the
excellent.
podcast. Yeah.
Um, and interestingly, what the research showed this time round was essentially the four positive mindset values remained the same, but there was one in particular that evolved more visibly than the other ones, and that was authenticity. And it turned from authenticity into intellectual authenticity. Can
Yeah.
you explain what that is and
Yeah, of course.
why is it why and what was it about that sort of stood out for you as an important?
Yeah. So sometimes it's a word that a buyer says that suddenly is a bit like a light bulb going off. And what happened this time round that suddenly made a lot of sense given some of the huge um, changes that have taken place in the world in recent years. We can talk about the pandemic and we can talk about AI in particular. And I'm just going to quote. Yeah, I'm just going to quote. I've got a list of quotes here from some of the buyers, but This is two different people
Hmm.
are talking about use the same word in a different way. Um, this is the chairman of a board of one of the largest tech companies in the world. Yeah, was one of the interviews, and he said, "You come to trust the intellectual honesty and the competence. No smoke, no mirrors, no superlatives." Yeah.
Mm.
And so that was a quote that was made, and this word, and that's if it's just a one-off, you would have said it's an interesting word. Why has he
Yeah.
chosen the word intellectual honesty? And then we had someone completely different, um, uh, completely different country. This was in Italy. Who said, "I'm disturbed first by intellectual dishonesty." Yeah. Don't tell
Wow.
me smoke or hot air. It's funny, they used two completely different people. And I'd never heard the word intellectual in all the interviews that I did first time round. So that was for me a new word. And I began to think in the context of all the other interviews that we did,
Yeah.
um, why has this, is it just luck? Is it just, why have these two words kind of surfaced? And if you take this into the context of AI, yeah, in particular, which is more recently, and here's some other quotes. Technology has made salespeople lazy.
Mm.
Relying purely on bots and AI and sending auto-generated emails is damaging the reputation of their company. That's just what procurement write with AI, sellers answer with AI, with procurement, and procurement then mark the homework with AI. Responses all look the same. You know, um, I mean, I've just picked out a few. They're selling something that isn't there. The seller is selling a bubble. And so, I'm just picking out from the many, many different quotes, that we've got a few, but I sort of came back to this thing about AI, and where in this world of, this AI wave is hitting us. And then people are generally questioning the authenticity of approach.
Mm.
And so what is the so what are they looking for from salespeople? And you've kind of got the intelligence element, which is the AI element, and then you've got the human element, yeah, and it's clear that AI is an incredible support tool,
Yeah.
for doing research, for helping, for becoming more productive, but used in the wrong way, it can completely destroy trust. So we then said, well, okay, let's go back to this word authenticity, because anyone who is themselves is authentic.
Mm.
But what buyers are saying, well, actually, yes, we want authenticity, but we want something a bit more than that, because, and they're right, they're looking for someone who provides the an intellectual framework which is genuine, it's authentic,
Yeah.
in the way that they apply, the way that they're looking at problem solving, or they're synthesizing information or data. And that intellectual authenticity is a real differentiator for salespeople. So it's quite interesting that we use this metaphor of a butterfly in transformation. Are you trying to build a faster caterpillar? We often say, by doing what you're doing more effectively, or are you trying to transform as a caterpillar into a butterfly? And so we use this a lot when we are working with sales leaders. Is the problem you're trying to solve with your sales team one that requires change, faster
Mm.
caterpillar, or is it? Anyway, so because we are playing with this sort of transformation imagery a lot, or metaphors, then and the butterfly, we have AI on the one side of the wing of a butterfly, which is what everyone's talking about, and then we've got IA on the other side. Yeah, that's the so it became a very, very strong image in our mind of what we think is important. So the word intellectual relates to something that we've often say on our academic programs that we teach is about reflective practice,
Hmm.
the ability to think, the ability to yeah, to draw upon different experiences, data points, information, sort of, which is very personal. Yes, AI is important, but how you prompt AI, how you work with AI to give something that is genuinely your thinking is what buyers are saying they
Mm.
look for from salespeople. So they expect you to use AI, of course, but they want that magic ingredient. They want to trust you, authenticity, but they need you to be intellectually authentic in the way that you um, act in their
And,
view.
and is that then being more in the eyes of the buyer, more transparent? So if I am using AI in
Y-
research for a proposal, I actually, when I provide the proposal, I don't just do a, hey, write me a proposal to fill it for this particular training and off it goes. I interrogate it, but I also maybe put a reference point like you would in a research paper or in a book to say AI has been used in the formation of this. Is this what you're
Yeah, I think that is, citing your source, citing your source is a very important component of being authentic.
saying?
And I think we're beginning to see more of that now, where people are saying, yeah, this is an AI generated, whether it's a LinkedIn post or whatever. We've used, there's a book that David Brock has just written actually around sales mindsets. I don't know if you've seen it, but he's written it with Claude, and Claude is an AI agent. So he's kind of cited it. Um, so yes, I think that that is an example. I mean, we're seeing it a lot from marking academic papers. Plagiarism and the use of AI to submit work. You've really got to make it you. And yes, you can use AI to do that. But if it's too much, just by saying, yes, I've used an AI tool to help
Yeah.
generate it, doesn't tick all the boxes. I mean, you've
No.
got to, for example, of course, we used AI to help us with our thematic analysis of the research. However, the AI tool did not come up with intellectual authenticity as
Mm,
one of the defining mindsets. We
mm,
did.
mm.
It wasn't, yes, we extrapolated the data from the thematic analysis, and it suddenly made us realize actually this is something that is important. Yeah.
And the thing that I was thinking about then is, and I've seen salespeople do this, fall into the trap of writing a proposal through AI, and it sounds very impressive, looks impressive, and they send it to the customer. At some point in the buying process, they have to have a real conversation with a real customer, and that might be a pitch, it might be a negotiation. So they need to understand what they've actually written and what the context of what they've written is. So if they
Yeah.
give in to AI and just send that to a
Yeah.
customer, they'll be found out very, very quickly that, hey, this wasn't your work, this wasn't your thinking, this was something you just threw into an AI bot and it spat it out. So I love the fact that the intellectual part is you don't give in to AI, you use AI through the method of maybe reframing or
Yeah.
getting some detail around what you're putting in place, but it has to be your thinking and you still need to interrogate, and that's where the reflection part becomes really important.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly sort of kind of where we're going with it. And also it's quite inspiring in a way because I think it's a slightly dystopian society that we feel we live in. What's real, what's fake,
Yeah.
fake news. There's so much of this sort of around, but actually it's what it's being human at the end of
Mm.
the day. What does being human mean in this world? Well, it's being intellectually authentic. That's being human.
Well, I
Yeah.
think, Philip, I love your take on this. I think sort of moving forward in the next 3, 4, 5 years, the differentiation that people are going to have, and particularly salespeople and sales leaders, is the ability to be human. Because at the end of the day, we still crave human connection. And so if we
Yeah.
give in to all of the AI and get AI to do everything, then we're no longer having that human interaction. And
Yeah.
it's the organizations that can humanize this. And this is why I love the intellectual authenticity, is you can bring back the human and focus your attention on the human, because that's going to drive higher level and deeper levels of trust than your competitors if
Yeah.
you focus on it.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so it's really there's no doubt that AI and agentic workflows and all of those things are going to have a profound impact, I think, on sales
Yeah,
generally. But it needs to be counterbalanced with this human connection.
yeah,
And that's why in this sort of transformative world in which I think we're living now within sales, I mean, this is an interesting thought that I've got, which is, I mean, if you look at what AI can do to help the sales profession, it's huge, it's massive. You know, whether you're looking at predictive forecasting, whether you're looking at coaching, whether you're looking at putting presentations together. And I have wondered whether AI is has the potential to make a bigger impact on sales as a function than almost any other function of a business. Because we deal with data, we deal with human relationships, we deal with customers, we deal with products, we deal with services. I don't know, maybe not, but I just think it's massive. The danger is we let it take over. You know, we
yeah.
let it take over the sales function. So I think getting this balance is where the magic will happen and will help differentiate salespeople from each other
Yeah.
and companies. Yeah, who
No, and
embrace.
I think the point you've been making through this is that the reflection piece, the interrogation, as you mentioned before, the AI through the thematic research or the analysis didn't come up with the terminology of intellectual authenticity. You
No, it
did.
didn't.
So you can't give in to the AI. You can use it for effectiveness, but you still got to question it.
You do. Yeah.
Mm. So the other piece there's two questions left I wanted to ask you, because I am
Yeah.
conscious of time. The other question I was going to ask you was in relation to the winner's circle. So it was interesting that a number of years ago, around about 10% would be in there. Did that materially change, or was some
Oh,
nuance in
yes.
that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you've raised that because the other thing I've been slightly concerned about is of course when we did the research first time round, less than 10% of salespeople sold in a way customers wanted. And that's a fairly damning indictment of the sales profession. And when we did the research this time round, it was less than 30%. And so I was really pleased.
Mm,
The needle has moved. You know, the floor has changed in that respect. It's still only less than 30, is still not good enough in our view. But it seems from the research we've done that buyers are seeing a more professional sales people sort of turn up than they did all those years ago, even though there's still room for improvement. And I felt pleased with this progression. You know, it is progress. We should
yeah,
celebrate it. You
that's
know,
it.
and I felt a bit awkward keep on citing the less than 10% figure because yeah, it was so low actually all those years ago. So yes, yeah, progress has been made. So that's good news. That's really good news.
Well, it also indicates that there is still work to be done, my friend.
It is. There is. There is. There will always be work to be done. What I'm guessing, what I think if we come back to our global research project in a year's or two's time, I'm worried that the authenticity piece is going to score even lower
Mm,
because I think of this over reliance on AI.
mm,
So what we've decided as a business to do is to keep this survey running not once every 15 years, but to keep it updated, maybe sort of do mini research announcements every year. We haven't quite
Yeah.
decided how we're going to do that,
Yeah.
just to keep more of a track. But a lot of the buyers that we interviewed or people that we interviewed were worried about the role of AI in the buyer-seller engagement process.
Mm.
Even though that 30% figure also came from them, they were worried about the
Yeah.
impact of AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. Um,
Can I share one other thing with you just quickly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, which was, I was also interested going into the research about a McKinsey report, and I think possibly Gartner as well, which talked about buyers not wanting to deal with salespeople.
Mm.
Yeah, just deal via it's like salespeople would come extinct if you believed what they had to say. So we were very explicit in asking all of the people that we interviewed about the McKinsey report and what their feelings were about salespeople. And it was unanimous in our survey that everyone that we interviewed said no, they absolutely saw value in engaging at a personal level with salespeople. It's really, they could not imagine. One person said, I couldn't imagine sort of spending, $1 million on a big CRM, yeah, and saying to the CEO, no, I met no one. I just couldn't see myself doing that. Saying we made a decision purely without meeting anyone from the company. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Yeah, a lot of people. So I fundamentally disagree with the data points that we've got. I really believe from certainly all the people that we've interviewed, um, that the role of the seller is really important to buyers, which is why so many people gave us time, for this research study.
I love that. I love that. And I keep saying people love to do business with those who they know, like, trust, but also remember, as long as you can do the things we've spoken about today, build
Yeah,
that level of trust,
exactly.
be intellectually authentic, and have that as a bedrock. But as you were talking there, I had this vision of sitting in a pub and getting my mobile phone out and actually taking a photo of a QR code. Imagine doing $1 million CRM by actually taking a photo of a QR code and just do self-selection. It sounds
Self-selection.
ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's essentially. I mean, the McKinsey report even cited sort of multi-million-dollar contracts being done, but all the procurement people that we interviewed said there's no way they could envisage that
No,
happening.
no.
They were genuinely against the concept.
Mm,
So yeah, to your point, I think people do buy from people. Yes,
they
they
do.
may do a lot of more research online and come better informed, but to not have any human connection throughout the entire buying cycle, for many, they wouldn't go there.
And I think that's really important because as you rightly said, buyers today are more educated than they've ever been. And there's more
Yeah,
information available to them where they're often doing research before they engage with any selling
yeah,
organization. In
yeah,
some cases, they've already made a buying decision before they've chosen to integrate or interact with that organization. So, and this sort of loops back then for the selling organization to really focus in on that intellectual authenticity
yeah,
because even simple things like putting posts up on LinkedIn, right, or putting
yeah,
posts up on your own Facebook page or
yeah,
wherever you happen to have your social platforms, people are going to do research and it'll pop up, right? So
yeah,
you want
yeah,
to be are you a person of integrity? Because that's what people want to do business with,
yeah,
who they
yeah,
want to do business with.
yeah, 100, yeah,
So
absolutely.
the final question for you, Philip, and I know we've gone a little bit longer than I said I was going to,
Oh,
but it's
sorry.
been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah,
Um, can you talk now, just briefly, to the sales leader that's listening to this, who um, is operating in a pretty competitive environment, and they've probably got some friction between um, try to become more customer centric, client centric, but the behavior internally is more of the supply centricity and some of the pressures that come with that. With all the research that you've done, is there one or two key things that a sales leader today can focus on or start to build the muscle around to at least start moving in the direction of where we want to head, having these four positive mindset values in place?
Um, as a leader, I think well, if you feel that this resonates as a leader, that to have these, then I would, what would I do? I would look at building a kind of culture around it, and you can do that by getting your customers involved in the journey because this is a customer-centric kind of initiative. So talk to your customers, ask them how do they want to be sold. Use the customer to help drive change. I mean, it's using Kotter's framework of a guiding coalition, create supporters around you that believe in making something like this happen. Use, different reflection techniques yourselves to work out how would you make this come alive in your business. But be forensic in the way that you start to look at every step of the sales cycle, what do these values mean in the way that we do stuff, even down to LinkedIn posts or how we reach out to organizations. But there's lots of reading material. There's the mindset survey data. There's the reports that we've got. There's all sorts of stuff if people are interested, to kind of learn more about it that they can have access to. But I think it starts with a vision of what you believe to be important as a leader. You really need to get underneath the skin of these concepts, and if you believe in it, then I think you'll figure out a way of
I
making it
love that.
happen.
I love that. And to I guess to steal the methodology or the thought process of Simon Sinek, start thinking more about
Yeah,
the infinite game and not get restricted by the finite game. Because the other thing and you mentioned this in your white paper as well, what customers and buyers are looking for is for you to um, and be empathetic towards their buying cycle, not to try and get them to fit into your sales cycle. So
yeah,
that's what they're looking for. And you might, once you've got a bedrock of trust in place, you might be able to, I don't know, for want of a better term, call some favors, but it's not something you want to make a
yeah,
regular habit of. But just treat it as, hey, this customer is going to be here. We want a lifetime relationship with this customer. So we don't want to jeopardize that by trying to get them to bring things forward just to appease our sales director or
yeah,
CEO.
yeah. I think that's right, but I also think for sales leaders that so much of the behavior is influenced by the quality of pipeline that you've
Yeah.
got in the business. So if you haven't got a strong enough pipeline, then sometimes that can drive the negative behavior. So when you start to look at driving a culture, you need to look at not just the values, but also, the way in which the business is being managed, the depth of pipeline that you've got,
Yeah.
the velocity speeds of deals and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Love it. Love it. Philip, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the podcast.
it's
I'm
great
going
to
to
be
ask
with you
you.
again,
It's
Darren.
been brilliant, and I could keep talking to you for hours. The the question I want to ask you though is for people who want to connect with you, learn more about Consalia, but perhaps get access to the mindset survey, but also the white paper that you've recently released. Where's the best place for them to connect with you and do that?
Well, I imagined, Darren, that there may be some notes in the post that people can connect to, but obviously our website is the place to go where both the mindset survey. So if you just sort of typed in sort of Consalia sales mindset survey, it would take you to the page. I'm not quite sure where the global research paper is, but it's probably very closely linked to that page as well. But yeah, just reach out or contact me. psquire@consalia.com. I'd be very happy to kind of connect with people if they want to be connected with.
Perfect. I'll put that in the show notes. Eddie did send me the link for the white paper, so I'll take that link and put it in the show notes as well. So
that's
and look,
great.
people listening to this, if you're in sales and sales leadership, which is majority of people listening, please do yourself a favor and learn more about what Philip does, and please get your hand on the white paper, because it's filled with gold that's only going to help organizations become better at serving their customers, which is going to help. Hopefully, here's my prediction. Hopefully, more and more sales people and sales organizations will become part of the winner's circle. So in 12 months' time, maybe it's 40, 50%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Darren.
Philip, absolute pleasure. You're an absolute star, and keep up the great work. And thanks again for being a guest on the podcast for the third time.
For the third time, I'm very honored. I didn't realize it was 3. I thought it was 2. Thank you, Darren. It's been fantastic being with you again. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.